He had always been the quiet, reliable guy. At work, people respected him for his honesty and dedication. But one day everything changed. Someone started spreading rumors. At first, it was small things, whispers that he was lazy, that he avoided responsibility. But soon the lies grew darker. Claims that he had stolen money from the company, betrayed his friends, cheated people. The looks around the office shifted. Colleagues no longer smiled the same way. Friends kept their distance. His reputation, something he had built with years of effort, was crumbling before his eyes. And all of it because of one person who thrived on lies and other people's misery. But he stayed silent. Not because he was weak, but because he was waiting. He knew the truth always comes out, and when it did, his revenge would be unforgettable. Every day became a battle of endurance. He walked into the office and felt the air shift. Conversations hushed when he passed. Eyes lingered too long, then darted away in guilt. People stopped asking him to join coffee breaks, team lunches, or after-work gatherings. It wasn't just the office. The whispers followed him outside. Friends asked carefully phrased questions, pretending to be concerned but dripping with suspicion. Even his parents, who had always trusted him, couldn't hide the unease in their voices when they asked, "Is everything okay at work?" We heard some things. The hardest part wasn't the judgment. It was the betrayal. He had given his best to these people, his colleagues, his friends, and now they looked at him like a stranger, like a criminal. Eventually, the name surfaced. Ethan. Ethan had always been charismatic. Too charismatic. He had a smile that disarmed people, a voice that drew them in, and an energy that filled every room he entered. But beneath the charm was ambition, cold, ruthless ambition. Ethan wanted power, influence, recognition. And the quiet guy stood in his way. Not because he competed directly with Ethan, but because his honesty highlighted Ethan's dishonesty. His quiet competence made Ethan's constant bragging look hollow. People had respected him without effort, and Ethan hated that. So Ethan did what he did best. He twisted the narrative. At first it was subtle. Did you notice he missed the deadline? Ethan would whisper even when the deadline had been met. I think he's struggling, maybe he's not as reliable as we thought. But subtlety didn't satisfy him for long. Soon the accusations grew bolder. He claimed that the quiet guy had mishandled funds. That confidential documents had been misplaced under his watch. That clients had complained about him. None of it was true. But Ethan spoke with confidence, always lowering his voice at the right moments, always feigning concern rather than malice. And people believed him. Because lies, once planted, spread like wildfire. Within weeks, his world had shifted. His manager began treating him with suspicion. Tasks that once came to him naturally were now given to others. His authority in projects diminished. One afternoon he was called into the manager's office. She sat across from him with a folder of papers, her expression unreadable. "I've received several complaints," she said carefully. "Concerns about your work ethic. About missing funds. About reliability." His mouth went dry. "They're lies," he said firmly. "None of that is true." She looked at him for a long moment. "I want to believe you. But perception matters. If enough people are saying it," she didn't finish. She didn't have to. The damage was already done. He walked out of that office with his chest tight, his pulse pounding. He had just been told, without the words being spoken, that he was one step away from losing everything he had worked for. And all because of Ethan. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at the ceiling. The city outside buzzed with life, cars rushing by, people laughing in the streets. But inside, silence pressed down on him like a weight. He thought about the years he had spent building his reputation. Every late night at the office. Every favor he had done for a colleague. Every sacrifice he had made to prove himself. And now it was all unraveling because of one man's lies. He clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. He wanted to fight back. To scream at everyone who doubted him. To confront Ethan in the middle of the office and expose him for the liar he was. But he didn't. Because anger alone wouldn't save him. He realized something that night. Ethan was clever but careless. Liars always were. They talked too much, exaggerated too often, and eventually slipped. Ethan might have won the crowd now, but his arrogance would betray him. And when it did, he would be ready. The next morning he started a notebook. Every rumor he heard, every detail Ethan slipped into conversation, every contradiction. He wrote it down. He became invisible, a ghost in the office, quietly observing while Ethan basked in the spotlight. He noticed how Ethan's stories changed depending on who he told them to. How sometimes he placed the blame on missing money at one date, then shifted it weeks later. How he exaggerated, forgetting what he had said before. The notebook filled quickly. Page after page of inconsistencies, contradictions, and potential witnesses. For now he stayed silent. But in his silence, something powerful was building: patience, strategy, and cold determination. Because Ethan thought he had destroyed him. But he was wrong. This was only the beginning. The days that followed were filled with silence. He stopped trying to defend himself because every word he spoke only seemed to fuel the rumors. People who once trusted him now nodded along when Ethan spoke, as if the lies were truth carved in stone. But he was not broken. Inside, something colder was forming. Each whisper, each suspicious glance, each false accusation only sharpened his focus. He knew Ethan thought he had won. That was his mistake. Quietly he began gathering more than just notes. He copied emails, saved project files, collected logs of transactions that Ethan had carelessly manipulated. When Ethan blamed him for a missing sum of money, he traced the numbers back and found evidence of Ethan's personal accounts swelling at the exact same time. It was sloppy greed, hidden under confidence, the kind of mistake that a patient man could exploit. At work he played the part of the defeated. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes tired, speaking less. Ethan thrived on it, mistaking silence for weakness. But in that silence he was building a case so strong it could shatter Ethan's empire in an instant. Outside of work he searched deeper. He spoke quietly with people who had once worked with Ethan. Old colleagues, acquaintances, even friends who had drifted apart. Slowly a pattern emerged. Ethan had done this before. Lies, manipulation, betrayal, but always leaving before the consequences could catch up. He had built his career on stepping on others, and each time he had escaped. Until now. Weeks passed and Ethan grew bolder. He smiled too wide, laughed too loud, celebrated victories that weren't his. One afternoon Ethan cornered him in the break room. "You know," Ethan said casually, "maybe this company just isn't for you anymore. People don't trust you. Maybe it's time you think about moving on." He said it like advice, but his eyes burned with cruelty. He didn't reply. He simply looked at Ethan and for a brief second, allowed the smallest smile to curl at the corner of his mouth. It was enough to unsettle Ethan, though he quickly covered it with his usual arrogance. What Ethan didn't know was that by then, the quiet man already had everything he needed. Documents, emails, bank transfers, witnesses who were ready to speak, now that someone had connected the dots for them. All of it pointed to one truth: Ethan was the thief, the liar, the manipulator. But revenge wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about timing. Striking when the enemy believed he was untouchable. So he waited until the company's quarterly meeting, the one where all executives, managers, and staff gathered in one room. Ethan, of course, stood at the center, ready to show off his fabricated successes. He talked about numbers, about growth, about his vision for the future. People clapped politely, though some had already begun to doubt. And then came the moment. The quiet man stood up. His voice was calm, but it carried through the room. "Before we move forward, I think there are some things that need to be addressed." All eyes turned to him. Ethan smirked, confident that no one would believe a word he said. But then the documents came out. Printed reports. Emails with Ethan's name on them. Bank statements that showed the stolen money flowing into his personal accounts. Witnesses who stood up and confirmed what they had seen and heard. The room shifted in an instant. Gasp. Whispers. Managers exchanging alarmed looks. And Ethan, for the first time, lost his smile. In that silence, justice began to take shape. Ethan's face drained of color as the evidence piled higher. He tried to laugh it off, to spin another lie, but his words stumbled over themselves. This is out of context," he stammered. "These are fabricated." But the documents were too clear, the witnesses too precise. Every word he spoke only sank him deeper. The executives exchanged grim looks. One of them quietly left the room to make a call. Within half an hour, 2 men in suits from the Financial Crimes Division of the police arrived. The meeting ended not with applause, not with celebration, but with silence heavy as stone as Ethan was escorted out in handcuffs. The quiet man sat back down, his heart steady. Years of patience, years of enduring lies and humiliation, all condensed into this single moment. Ethan was finished. The investigation moved fast. The files he had collected revealed not just one act of fraud, but a trail spanning years. Money siphoned from project budgets. Deals made in the shadows. Lies layered so carefully, until someone patient enough had pulled the threads apart. In court, Ethan tried everything. Denials. Excuses. even turning on former allies, but no one stood by him. The witnesses who once stayed silent now came forward willingly, backed by the undeniable evidence. Every lie crumbled, every mask shattered. The verdict was clear: guilty. Ethan was sentenced to years in prison. And because of the restitution demands, nearly every dollar he had stolen was seized and returned. His expensive car, his penthouse apartment, his hidden accounts, gone. The empire he had built on lies had been stripped away, leaving him with nothing. The quiet man didn't celebrate publicly. He didn't need to. Watching Ethan led away in chains was enough. Back at the office, people's eyes softened again when they looked at him. Some apologized, some couldn't even meet his gaze out of shame. He accepted neither apologies nor excuses. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. But he felt no need to explain himself. He had proven everything through actions, not words. At night, when he finally sat alone in his apartment, the silence no longer pressed on him like a weight. Instead, it was calm, peaceful. For the first time in months, he could breathe freely. Because justice wasn't loud. It wasn't about shouting or revenge for the sake of revenge. It was about patience. About letting the truth do what lies could never withstand. And Ethan, he regretted underestimating the quiet man.